Hello friends, I'm George, the nice smelling gentleman. Welcome back to the channel guys, I hope that all of you are doing well. In today's video I'm going to score and rank 17 of the more popular Maison Alhambra fragrances. Do you agree with my scoring? I'm really curious to know that. Use the comment section down below to let me know how do you find my scoring of the 17 Maison Alhambra scents today. Now before I start showing you the fragrances, I just wanted to quickly mention something else out. The lowest score that you're going to see in today's video will be a score of 5. And always keep in mind the fact that Maison Alhambra fragrances, at least most of them, tend to be very cheap, and that also plays a role in the score itself. So I'm going to start with the one fragrance that actually is going to get a score of 5, and that will be the Artist No.1. This fragrance is heavily inspired by Frederic Maile's Portrait of a Lady. Now scent-wise, it's not a bad inspiration of the original fragrance. Actually gets pretty close, but the reason why this will get such a low rank will be, first of all, because I paid a little bit more than the usual Maison Alhambra price, and also because of the performance. Now the original fragrance relies very heavily on some smoky notes and the note of rose. And usually rose based fragrances tend to be very powerful, very long lasting, but at least in my experience the Artist No.1 actually turned out to be more of a moderate projection. And also the scent profile can be a bit challenging, it's a bit old school, and that's the reasoning why the Artist No.1 will actually get a score of 5. Moving on to the two fragrances that are going to get a score of 6. In fact, both of them come from the Glacier line. The first one is called Glacier Bold, and this one is inspired by Jean-Paul Gaultier's Le Beau, and to be honest, I'm not a huge fan of the original fragrance. That's one of the reasons why the Glacier Bolt will get a score of 6. Also, another thing is that this just wasn't a good performer, at least in my experience. I've been getting no more than 6 hours of performance out of this fragrance, so that's my second reasoning for giving such a low score on this fragrance. And the third one is because, again, the Glacier line tends to be a little bit more expensive, and I just expected a little bit better quality and a little bit better performance. And then the second one from the Glacier line that actually is going to get a score of 6 is Le Noir. This one is inspired again from Jean-Paul Gaultier fragrance, but in this case it's LMO Leer. I absolutely love the original fragrance, but unfortunately Glacier Le Noir just didn't live up to the hype or to my expectations. It's not as close to the original fragrance that as I wanted it to be, and although it improved a little bit with some maceration, still I think it's not the best clone of LMO Leer that you can get. And another area again was the performance. Again, it's better performing than the Glacier Bolt, but still nowhere near the performance of the original fragrance, and again didn't live to my expectations when it comes to performance. And the third factor again will be that this is a little bit more expensive, and I just had higher expectations for what I will get in return for that amount of price. Now moving on to a couple of fragrances that are going to get a score of 7. Both of them actually are freshies, and the first one is called Jorge Di Profumo, and this was one of the very first Maison Alhambra fragrances that I actually got into my collection. And this one is inspired by Jge de Profumo from Armani. The original fragrance is one of my all-time favorite scents, one of my all-time most favorite sort of a freshy type of scents. Jorge Di Profumo is not a bad clone of the original fragrance, gets pretty similar, although lacks a little bit of that incense vibe that you get out of the original scent, that just adds enough darkness to make it a little bit more unique and stand out in the Jge de line. So one of the reasons why this will get a score of 7 and not higher is because it lacks a little bit of that incense note. This feels like a mix between the original Jge de and Jge de Profumo. And the other reason why this will get a score of 7 is because it doesn't perform very well. It's more of a moderate performing fragrance, which is to be expected of this scent profile, but still it would have been nice if this one actually had a slightly better performance. And the second fragrance that is going to get a score of 7 will be Dark Door Sport. This one of course being heavily inspired by Dior Homme Sport. Now I absolutely love the original fragrance. It's again one of my favorite fresh type of scents. It's a very versatile, very long-lasting masculine fragrance, and Dark Door Sport gets pretty close to the original fragrance scent-wise, although this feels more synthetic, feels sharper, feels a little bit more spicy, and quite a bit more musky on the dry down. Still will get you reasonably close to the original fragrance. Has pretty decent performance for you know, this fresh type of scent, but the reasoning behind this getting this only a score of 7 will be because of that sharpness and slight synthetic vibe that I get out of it, and because of that, again, sharpness from the muskiness on the dry down. Other than that, it's not a bad fragrance, but still this will get a rating of 7. Moving on to the fragrances that will get a score of 8. The first two will be one of those hyped up beasts from the brand of Maison Alhambra. Really one of those, you know, two of those scents that actually put the Maison Alhambra brand on the markets and on the map. The first one is called the Tux. This one is very heavily inspired by YSL Tuxedo and actually gets very close scent-wise to the original fragrance. You get that very old school smelling masculine scent that relies a lot on the patchouli, some spices, vanilla, rose. Very old school, very barbershoppy vibe, at least I get from the original fragrance. And the Tux actually does a very good job you know, at copying the original scent. The reasoning why this will get a score of 8 and not higher will be the first reason because it lacks a bit of the performance. The second reason is because the bottle size is only 80 milliliters in here. It would have been nice if this had a bigger bottle size. And the third reason will be because this so much hype that actually prices were very high on this, unreasonably high, and a lot of people actually had a hard time finding a bottle of this for a reasonable price. So that's why this one will get a score of 8. And the second one of those hyped up beasts is called Kismet Angel, and this was pretty much the first clone of Kilian's Angel Share to hit the markets and to garner some attention. Again, pretty similar to the original fragrance, one of the best inspirations, especially in the opening where it gets the boozy note of the original, the cognac note of the original fragrance, pretty nicely replicated. You know, all around a very nice scent, but again, a few reasons why this gets a score of 8 is because on the dry down this feels slightly different to my nose than the original fragrance. Also because it lacks the performance, is not the greatest performer in the world. And the third reason, again, like the Tux, this saw so much hype that at one point prices were very high. This was very hard to get, and really, you know, people shouldn't overpay for this fragrance because especially nowadays I think there are better alternatives. So the second one that will get a score of 8 will be Kismet Angel. The next two that will get a score of 8 will be the first one, Hercules. This one is very heavily inspired by Parfum de Marly's Hero. It gets the scent profile of the original fragrance very nicely done. It's pretty similar to the original one. You get that sweet tobacco based fragrance that has some woods, some spices, all around a very warm and easy to wear fragrance. Pretty nicely done, but again, a few reasons why this will get a score of 8 and not higher. First of all is the performance, not so much the lasting power. This has a decent performance on skin, about 7 hours, which is not bad, but where this seriously lacks is the projection. It's a very intimate type of scent that unfortunately doesn't project very nicely, so that's probably the main reason why this will get a score of 8 and not higher. The next one that will get a score of 8 will be Salvo Intense. This one is heavily inspired by Dior Sauvage EDP. Actually, scent wise very close to the original scent, surprisingly close. Performance wise, again, surprisingly good performer, not as good as the original, but still gets you know, the performance thing done really nicely. It's pretty cheap. The only reason why I will give this one a score of 8 and not higher is simply because the Sauvage DNA has been quite overplayed at this point in time, and a lot of people actually don't enjoy it that much anymore. But other than that, this actually is surprisingly good, and I was really torn between giving this one a score of 9 or an 8, but at the end of the day I'm going to give it a score of 8. So the next one with score of 8 will be Salvo Intense. And the last two fragrances that are actually going to get a score of 8, the first one will be Afro Leather, this one being very heavily inspired by Memo's African Leather. It's very nicely done, very similar to the original fragrance. This one feels a little bit more spicy in the opening. There's a cumin note in here that I'm not really a huge fan, but luckily after 5 to 10 minutes that cumin note actually loses its strength, and you know, after that this fragrance is really enjoyable for me. On the dry down it becomes very warm. You rely a lot on the leather note, on amber note. It's a sweet, slightly spicy and a leathery based fragrance, and the dry down of this fragrance is actually pretty enjoyable. A few reasons why this will get a score of 8. The first one is because the scent profile can be a bit challenging for some people. The second reason will be because of that cumin note, the strength of the cumin note in the opening, which to my nose is just a little bit too much. And the last reason will be because, again, this comes only in an 80 ml bottle size instead of a normal 100 ml. So the next one that will get a score of 8, Afro Leather. And the last fragrance that will get a score of 8 in today's video will be Dark Door Intense. This one is heavily inspired by Dior Homme Intense, one of my all-time most favorite fragrances. And I've said this many times, but Dark Door Intense actually does a very good job you know, at copying the original scent. You get that very irisy, very powdery scent profile that has a bit of pure, has some woods and some musk on the dry down. Scent-wise, really nicely done. The reason why this will get a score of 8 and not higher, despite the fact that it carries my most favorite scent profile ever, is because of the performance. This thing performs really poorly, at least in my experience. It lasts for about 6 to 6.5, maybe even up to 7 hours, but the main reason why the performance is bad on this one is because of the projection. Again, another very intimate type of scent that just does not project you know, good enough. And in fact, I was really wondering whether to give a score of 7 to this one or an 8, but at the end of the day I'm going to give it a score of 8 simply based on the fact that I absolutely love the original scent profile. Moving on to the two fragrances that will get a score of 9. The first one is called Victorioso Victory. Nowadays I think it's called Victorioso Nero. And this one is very heavily inspired by Paco Rabanne's Invictus Victory. Very similar to the original fragrance, almost identical scent wise, and the performance again almost identically good as the original fragrance. One of the best clones that I have in my collection when it comes to how close it is to the original scent. It's also very cheap, and the only reason why this will get a score of 9, maybe something like 9.5, is simply because I'm not a huge fan of the original scent. But other than that, in my opinion, this is one of the best Maison Alhambra fragrances that you can get. And the second one that is going to get a score of 9 will be again part of the Glacier line, and this one is called Glacier Ultra. This one is a inspiration of Jean-Paul Gaultier's Ultramont. Very nicely done, very similar to the original fragrance. Gets the opening almost completely right, just lacks a bit of the sparkly feel that you get out of the original scent, but other than that it's super close in the opening, in the dry down. Has very good performance, not as good as the original, but still very close you know, performance wise, and all around is one of the better Maison Alhambra fragrances that you can get, and that's the reason why this will get a score of 9. So the second 9 in today's video, Glacier Ultra. And now moving on to the 10s. So there will be a total of 4 fragrances today that are going to get a score of 10. The first one is called Jge Le Ombre. Again, nowadays I think this is called Jge Le Noir. A lot of Maison Alhambra fragrances seems to have changes made to their names. This one is heavily inspired by Louis Vuitton's Ombre Nomade. Pretty similar to the original fragrance. You get that very Middle Eastern style of perfumery with lots of agar oud, rose, leather, raspberry, incense, amber. I really like the original. I really like all the good clones of the original, and Jge Le Ombre is actually one of those clones, good clones. It comes very nicely packaged. You get a magnetic cap. Performance is very good all around. For me, this is a 10. It's a little bit more expensive than some other Maison Alhambra fragrances, but I think it's worth it if you like that original scent profile. The second fragrance that is going to get a score of 10 will be part of the Zafiro line, and it's called Crafted Oud. This one being heavily inspired by Tamin's Carved Oud, also pretty similar to Tom Ford's Oud Oud. It's a very nice, very dark, very sexy fragrance in my opinion, that has a lot of spicy notes, relies heavily on the notes of leather, of agar oud, and we get some ambery sweetness. Again, dark and sexy, masculine, with very good lasting power. Comes very nicely packaged. I absolutely love the you know, the scent of this fragrance. Probably the only con of this one will be the fact that it doesn't project very loudly, but I can forgive that because everything else I really like about this fragrance. So the second one that's going to get a 10 today will be Crafted Oud. The next one that is going to get a score of 10 will be Cassius from Maison Alhambra, of course, and this one is very heavily inspired by Parfums de Marly Carlisle. I absolutely love the original fragrance, and I really like Cassius as well. Of course, lacks the quality of the original, feels a little bit sharper in the opening, but actually the opening is the worst part for the first few minutes. After that, it actually gets pretty similar to the original scent. It relies, of course, very heavily on some spices, on some fruits, on quite a bit of vanilla sweetness. There's a strong tobacco note in here. There's some boozy note. I really like the original fragrance, and Maison Alhambra actually did a fantastic job with Cassius as well. It's dirty cheap, has fantastic performance, and all around those are the reasons that this will get a score of 10. Of course, also aided by the fact that I love the original fragrance. So the next one that gets a score of 10 is Cassius. And the last one that will get a score of 10 will be Exclusif Tabac, and this one is heavily inspired by Carolina Herrera's Mystery Tobacco. Fragrance that, you know, judging by the name, you can guess, probably guess, that relies heavily on the note of tobacco. This is a sweet tobacco-based fragrance that has some spices, but all around it's all about the mix of vanilla and sweet tobacco. I love the original fragrance. I love Exclusif Tabac. It's a very smooth, very long-lasting fragrance. It has a very nice quality, has absolutely fantastic performance, and all around is one of my most favorite tobacco-based scents. So the last 10 in today's video, Exclusif Tabac. And so guys, in today's video I scored 17 of the most popular Maison Alhambra fragrances according to my own opinion. I hope that you found this video interesting or entertaining. If you did, give it a like, and I also hope that you're going to join me in the next one. And until then, stay safe and bye bye.